beautiful studios of octalkradio.net. Yes, we are. All right, let's start with, what's the main idea of your book, The Coaching Effect? And which one of you would like this? I'm going to look at you first. Bill, can you start the answer to that question? And then, Sarah, I'll ask you to add to it, okay?
Sounds good.
All right.
The main idea is that nobody will grow, whether it's individuals or organization, as much as they could without having a great coach. So I would say that's a primary driver of information, is that coaches have the biggest impact on performance. Or keep in mind, we use the word coach as opposed to leader or manager. We believe leaders and managers need to behave more like a coach to get the most growth out of their teams.
Okay.
So it's all revolving around how managers and leaders need to behave more like a high-growth coach to drive more performance.
Okay. Would you like to add something to that, Sarah?
We've spent a lot of time studying what the best coaches and leaders do, and we've been able to take that information and turn it into practical activities, behaviors that other coaches can learn to do as well. So a lot of what our book is, besides the philosophy around coaching like Bill talked about, it's also really practical. If you want to be a great coach, here's exactly what you can do to become one.
So it's prescriptive.
Absolutely.
All right. So now that we've established kind of the main idea of the book, let's back up and talk about the authors a little bit. Okay. So,
Sarah's favorite topic.
we only have 20 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to.
Just the
It takes me
highlights.
that long to introduce myself.
Okay, I get that. So, and there's both of you. So, how did you two meet? And how did you begin to decide to collaborate on a book? Because that's a hard project individually, let alone having to rely on somebody else. So how did you two meet?
Which one of those two
You
do you
start
want to
there. I
answer?
like the second one.
You like the second
Yeah.
part better? I met Sarah's husband many years ago, and when I was in my last role of EVP working with a publicly traded company, I hired her husband.
Okay.
And that's the first time then I got to know Sarah, was back then. And so Sarah and I ended up, if you read the book or if you watch this TED Talk that I did, you'll learn that I was fired from my job, which is why I started the company.
Okay.
And ironically, Sarah was fired from the same company. So I hired her 2 years after I had started the organization, and we met prior to that, but that's how we've been together for almost 8 years now with the company.
Yeah. And so how the book came about, one of the things we talk about in the book is the importance of doing career discussions with the people that you're coaching and leading, and talking to them about what they want to be accomplishing personally and professionally. Bill was having one of these discussions with me, asked me, what's my professional dream? And I gave some lame answer, and he said, okay, sure, grow the company, whatever, but what do you really want to do? What would be, something you'd want to look back on and say you accomplished? And I said, I'd like to write a book. And so Bill, filed that away in his mind, and then submitted some of our work and spent some time going to publishers, and then all of a sudden surprised me one day and said, hey, we got accepted. So we're writing a book.
And how long ago was that?
About 3 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah.
It took a while to get it written and go through the publishing process.
Interrupted a couple different times. And it takes on. We were literally done writing I was going back looking at our notes. We were done. So the book was released in April of 2019.
Right.
We were done writing the manuscript in May of 2018.
Right.
Yeah. So it
That's
takes
a
that
process.
long.
It's a process.
Right.
Yeah. I know after you write, I imagine after you've written the book, you're ready to get it published, and then they say, well, it might take 6
That's
or 9
right.
months,
That's
maybe a year.
exactly right.
Like, what?
Exactly.
You creative types, right? It's like the people who make movies. They're done with the movie.
We
and
just want to be
Right,
done.
get it out.
Right,
Yeah.
get it out. All right. So I imagine during the writing process, there might have been a few, what do we say, creative differences that have come up?
Yeah.
Was that a healthy process where you kind of give and take a little bit? And did it make the book better because both of you challenged each other?
Yeah.
Well, I think by the way Sarah and I work together, and we even talk about this in the book, where she's kind of the yin to my yang, and our brains work so much differently anyway. But I'm thinking, as I'm sitting here looking at you, I can't remember a creative difference that we had.
We had to hash through a lot of things. I think probably the biggest obstacle to overcome in writing a book is the idea that you have to communicate in a one-way, one direction to people.
One voice.
Yeah.
we're right. And who's going to write what?
Who's going to write what? And then on top of that, you're so used to having conversations where it's a back and forth and they ask questions and then you comment on something. That's what we do when we're teaching our content to a lot of our clients. But when you're communicating in a book, you just have to be able to anticipate what somebody's thinking and what they would need to know right now. And so that was really hard because we're not usually linear communicators.
Sure.
It goes all over
And
the
Sarah,
place.
quite frankly, is the better educator of the two of us. I'm the better storyteller. So when it comes time in the book, when there was a need for a story, or that would be my piece. When it came to chapters where we really needed to be prescriptive, that was Sarah's piece. So she just is much better at that than me.
So let me ask you, having you both being fired, how did that inform both the book and then also how does that affect your coaching practice and the work that you do with clients? I mean, I'm glad you're both real enough to admit that here on the radio show.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You're not the first two that have been in the studio.
you know, it's not something you wanted to talk about right away.
Oh, you brought it up.
And I'd be right. No, but right. I mean, you could bring it up. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, after I was let go, there was it's not something you want to address. It's not something you're going to go brag about. And it took actually a number of years before I was really able to be vulnerable with it and admit it. But the beautiful part about me getting fired is, I mean this quite literally, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
I'll bet you wouldn't.
Sarah and I wouldn't work together. Ann and I wouldn't work together. We wouldn't be on the radio together.
Yeah, you wouldn't have written the book.
Wouldn't have written a book had I not been fired.
Right.
Sarah wouldn't be likely working with me had she
Absolutely,
not been fired. So
this forced entrepreneurship can have big dividends, can't it?
Well, and one of the big themes of the coaching effect is this idea of getting outside of your comfort zone. And sometimes these events happen because you choose it to happen, and sometimes it's not your choice.
Right.
But it forces upon you this new reality that you then have to learn to adapt and deal. And we've seen through our research, people grow the most when they're outside their comfort zone. So to Bill's point, he probably would never have started his own company if he wouldn't have gotten fired. He never would have done something that kind of brave and outside the box. But he was forced into this situation and then he had to adapt. And so he grew a lot from it. Same thing for me. You have to get outside your comfort zone if you're really going to be able to grow. And we take that into our coaching work.
And that all ties in because one of the primary themes of the book is, and it was interesting how this all came about. So I had to backtrack for a quick second. So I had the opportunity to do a TED Talk in 2017 where we introduced this concept of growth only occurs in a state of discomfort and a concept called the growth rings. That interrupted the writing of our book. Well, that was another interesting outcome because that changed everything, changed how we wrote the book. Because the talk's got over 3 million views. And everybody has all of a sudden jumped on this concept of what we call the growth rings that we describe in the book. And the tie-in to that is a coach, a manager, a leader. Their primary job is to create healthy discomfort for people on their team so that they grow.
Right. You don't want to fire everybody so they grow, right?
Right, exactly.
I'm doing you good here, actually.
Right.
You're going to thank me someday, kid.
So that's how it all kind of tied in together.
Wow, that's powerful. Okay. So who's the target audience for your book? When you wrote the book, who's buying it?
Yeah.
Who's your target market out there, Richard?
Okay.
I mean, literally, it's business owners, CEOs, anybody who has a team of people that reports to them, whether I'm a frontline manager all the way up to a CEO of a Fortune 100 company.
Right.
If you have people that report into you, you need to understand the impact you're having on them or the impact you could or should have on them.
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting. My parents are both teachers, and they were reading the book, and they said, wow, Sarah, this is actually applicable to us. They were a little shocked because it talks about concepts of here's how you help somebody develop and grow and help them get better in terms of their career, but also their lives. And so I think it's really relevant as a concept to pretty much anybody that wants to help somebody else grow, or they themselves want to grow and develop.
Yeah, and we've had athletic coaches now read it and reach out to us, and I mean, even athletes, just basically on the concept of discomfort and growth.
So this is kind of a follow-up question to that, which is, when you get somebody in the room and you explain to them the best way for them to grow is to learn to become comfortable with discomfort, what's the first response? Because that may not be the natural human state, right? Discomfort. We try to avoid that.
Absolutely.
So how do you get them to get comfortable with the concept of being uncomfortable or discomfort?
Yeah. One of the things we talk a lot about is their own growth experiences. And I've found that that's the best way to help somebody understand that they need to get outside of their comfort zone, because when they think about times in their lives when they grew a lot, starting a new job, maybe a promotion, maybe getting fired, those types of occurrences, that's when they really learned and developed a lot. And once they kind of reflect on it and they think through, yeah, you're right. I grew when I was kind of forced into a position where I had to either get better or I wasn't going to be successful. And so they've learned over time through their own experiences that they really do grow in times of discomfort. They just have to choose to create it more often rather than waiting for it.
Yeah. And I think understanding as well, Richard, the different environments that impact growth, stagnation, what we refer to order, complexity, which is the state where the only environment where growth occurs, and chaos, those being the four environments. If people understand how those all work and they can adapt those environments to probably every aspect of their life, those pretty much any environment we're in can be defined in one of those by one of those names,
right?
Stagnation, order, complexity, or chaos. And when you walk through that and people understand that, there's quite frankly a lot of aha moments. And then people will reflect on it, to Sarah's point, and then say, wow, I get it now. Order with predictable outcomes, that brings comfort. Unpredictable outcomes is what makes discomfort, but that's the only place it grows. So there's a consciousness that has to evolve.
So how do you explain to a leader of a company that to get maximum growth potential out of their people, they must create this healthy sense of discomfort while they're also trying to create an engaged workforce and people who want to stay there? I mean, how does it not become a negative?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's so really interesting on that. We actually did some research on this just in the past few weeks, looking at coaches that did a good job of getting their team members out of their comfort zone, but who didn't have a great relationship with their team members. And that's the difference between comfort that feels like I'm growing, or discomfort that's feeling like I'm growing and developing, versus it being unhealthy. If you don't have a good relationship with your team members, absolutely they're going to see it as a bad environment. Yeah, you're
just pushing me.
Right, exactly.
You're a jerk.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds like trust is important. You said
Absolutely.
relationship, but the word I heard was trust.
Absolutely. That's another good way to say it.
Right, because if you're going to want me to be vulnerable and to be uncomfortable and to be stretching myself, I may fail.
Right.
And if you don't hold that against me because I'm learning, then I'll try it. But if I don't trust you, I'm just giving you ammunition with which to.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. And along that line, we're in the process of researching pretty extensively the concept of psychological safety.
Yes.
Which ties into this, which is becoming really, really big in the business, just in the performance marketplace, business or anywhere.
So help me to understand this question, since you are researching it and you're experts here, and I should continue to mention that I have two authors. The book is The Coaching Effect. Bill Eckstrom and Sarah Wirth are here, and we're talking about their latest book, which just came out earlier this year, and I said it, The Coaching Effect. So how do you, when you're working with people, do you see that the younger two generations in the workforce are driving this need to have managers or coaches, or honestly, it's always been this way, we just never paid as much attention to it as we should have in the past? Is this a millennial, generational thing, or is this a human condition that we're just now kind of getting a realization to?
So, like you mentioned, we are researchers, so we do like to look at questions like the one you just asked. And one of the things that we found is that the older generations in the workforce absolutely perform better when they have this type of coach, the one who builds trust with them, a relationship, is able to get them outside their comfort zone. That works across the generations for coaching. What's different with the millennials is that they expect that. So the older generations still benefit from it, but the millennials are saying this is how it should be.
And they'll leave without it.
Yeah, exactly. The older generations don't demand it as much, even though they respond well to it.
Okay, and we're now seeing Gen Z coming in. So, millennials, you had your moment in the sun, but stand aside now because Gen Z's coming into the workforce, baby. And one of the things that I've heard, and tell me if this is in your purview as well, is that we can't assume just because they look like the millennials, their motivations are the same as the millennials. In other words, Gen Z may not be just an extension of Gen X.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes, to answer that. And while I think it's important to understand those subtleties, whether they be small or glaring between the generations, when it comes to coaching, you want to have that knowledge, but it's somewhat insignificant.
Okay.
In the sense that everybody's unique anyway. If we look at, say, another person that's in this room, Anna, who's our director of marketing, she doesn't fit almost any millennial stereotype. She comes in early, she stays late. There's, so if you want to label her like a millennial, she doesn't behave like one.
Right.
So when you coach her, she has to be coached uniquely.
Okay.
As does everybody. Everybody's order, everybody's complexity, everybody's comfort and discomfort are all unique and different.
Yes.
So while it's wise to understand it, if I'm a great coach, it's somewhat insignificant to my coaching.
Okay. Do you ever get a business leader who says, I'm not a coach of my people, I'm their boss. How can I be their boss and a coach at the same time?
Yes.
And what do you say to them?
Again, to Bill's point, everybody's different. But one of the things that, especially if you're talking to a CEO, they seem to respond to a lot is putting the data in front of them. I mean, that's been a huge part of our journey, is actually being able to link up these coaching behaviors and activities to results, to improved sales numbers. And when you can show improved sales numbers to a CEO, then they start to listen a little bit differently.
Right, that is absolutely true.
Yeah.
There needs to be an ROI on this expense. If I'm going to change, I want the cash register.
And they should. I mean, that should be a prerequisite.
Yeah.
Isn't it sort of getting them out of their comfort zone?
It is.
So it's actually using the coaching effect on them.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
When we work with organizations, we're disruptors. And we have to let them know that we're going to be showing them some data because we measure their current effectiveness as leaders and coaches.
Ooh.
And we can literally give them a number, and that creates discomfort in and of itself.
Right.
And then we're going to tell them to change behaviors to get more out of their teams. And most people, and we say this in the book, it's just over 40%, aren't willing to change anyway. So quite literally, you could show 40% of anybody in a management or leadership role, what we'll call a coach, information on how to quite literally get more performance from their team. And in sales, if you do these things, your team will sell more stuff.
Yes.
40% still won't do it.
Right. They're not.
Because it's so hard to get out of order.
Right.
And into complexity.
Right. It's different.
Yes. So you kind of talked around it, and I want to make sure I ask you, what other resources are available from your company to support the concepts and the IP within the coaching effect? What else do you do?
Thank you, by the way, for mentioning the book. The book, number one. Number two, I think the TED Talk is a good. It's called "Why Comfort Will Ruin Your Life."
You always need a good title when you give a TED Talk.
Yeah, I know. Right?
Absolutely.
Gotta be.
Which is surprising that with the title like that, it would cause so much interest. We have what we call the Growth Rings Indicator, which is newly developed, and all these are free resources. It stands the book. That's at all the great bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. But the Growth Rings Indicator, individuals can take it, and it helps them understand kind of where within these growth rings they sit in their life, whether they're in a state of stagnation or order or complexity, and where within those growth rings they sit. And it's really kind of fascinating to see where you stand within those environments.
And if someone wants to take that assessment, how would they do that?
Yeah, they go to our website, excellinstitute.com. It's ECSELL institute.com.
Okay.
And they can get the growth rings. They can go through the quiz there. They can get the TED Talk.
There's
lots of white papers. Yeah,
all
tons
kinds
of
of
resources.
information that are just free resources that people can get.
Right.
Absolutely.
So,
How do they get your podcast, Richard?
well, we're everywhere. We're on iTunes and Stitcher and YouTube, and you'll find it. So, was there anything that you learned about this concept of coaching that you didn't really realize before you put the effort into writing the book and organizing your thoughts?
Yes, and that's a great question. It's not so much it was before we wrote the book, which was one of the motivators to writing the book, and that was the concept of discomfort. We knew relationships mattered. We knew they had to have good organizational skills and great processes and accountability, but there was something that we weren't finding, and the more we dug into the research, the discomfort component came out, and we're like, oh my gosh, but why discomfort? And then we began work with a PhD in org behavior and leadership, and Sarah and I and this person, we kind of put all our thoughts together, and that's when this came spitting out that growth only occurs while in a state of discomfort. So for me, I don't know about you, sir, if there was another one for you.
No, I think that was probably our biggest aha, simply because you hear so much about employee satisfaction and happy employees. And we like happy employees too, but happy employees alone aren't always the best producers. And so it was kind of a surprise to understand that, actually what the great coaches do is they challenge you and push you. And at times you may not like hearing it, but so long as you trust them.
You always like hearing from me.
Yeah,
Right.
sure. But so long as you trust them and you know that they have your best interest at heart, you'll go with them and you'll allow them to challenge you and push you and get you outside of your comfort zone. But that was a surprise to understand that that's what the best coaches do differently.
In the research, when we see coaches that have great relationships, and that's where it stops, that there's no complexity to the relationships at all, they drive no discomfort, they don't score as well. Their teams don't sell as much. They don't perform as high as levels. The athletes don't play as hard as they do when coach creates that discomfort on top of it.
Boy, that is, I wish we had more time on Critical Mass Radio Show and Podcast, because I think it's fascinating the natural tension that exists between people's psychological safety and the need to be a bit outside their comfort zone to really achieve new skills. That takes that's why you guys have a business.
Yeah.
That's why you're helping so many people, because that's just not a natural thing that everybody rolls out of bed and knows how to do. And in the wrong hands, that sounds like something that you could overdrive one side or the other.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a balance that is required.
You're describing
there,
it well, Richard. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, that's what I'm learning from this conversation and from your book. So this is an interesting concept that requires buying the book, reading the book, and then if you have additional questions, contacting at least you two, right?
Sure.
Absolutely.
We'd love to hear from anybody.
Well, this has been great. Thank you, Sarah, for making this all happen. I appreciate the fact that you sent me a copy of your book and that you're here in the studio today. I know you're visiting clients in Southern California. That's why we're
actually doing a workshop, coaching that's named after the book. We're doing a coaching effect workshop in Newport Beach.
Newport Beach.
Oh,
yeah.
Beautiful.
Fancy.
Newport Beach tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. If someone's listening to the live stream, could they register, or is
They
it a close?
absolutely
All right.
could.
Well, you're not too late. See,
Come on
bonus
down to the
round.
Hyatt Regency
Yeah.
at Newport Beach.
Oh my gosh, on a what is that, a Wednesday morning? I'm a little lost track of time here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for being friends of the program and sharing a bit of your knowledge and writing the book and doing the work you're doing with so many coaches / business owners and CEOs. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Well,
absolutely.
Richard, thank you very much. You're a gentleman. Appreciate it.
I enjoyed the time together. I'd like to thank our engineer for today, Mr. Paul Roberts, and my 3 producers, without whom we could not do this show. You know who you are, but I'd like to mention you each show. Joan Park, who's been with us for 4 years, Crystal Nunley, who's been with us for 5 years, and our newest producer Nicole Terry, who normally is in the studio. Good thing she's not here today because it's a little bit full. She's actually back at class at Fullerton. If you'd like to connect with me, I'd say let's start on LinkedIn. I'm Richard Franzi, Franzi. And until our next show, I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.
You have been